Now, when you're attacked and when you're threatened, everybody has one or two responses, probably hardwired into us. I mean, this is not something you think about. This is something that just you do. I mean, your body responds. And you've heard them talk about it. Fight or flight. When you're threatened or you're attacked, either you bow up and slug it out or you run to safety. That's your immediate response. You either bow up or you run to safety. I'm looking back at myself, I'm a get safe person. I'll get safe and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do. How about y'all? What do you? What's your immediate response? Yeah.
Depends on what it is.
This would be something.
It would be.
Now, if it were your kid, you would be getting them to safety, and then you'd figure out your response. This is not something you get to think about. This is not something that this is an instinctive, just reaction when you feel threatened. Yeah. So yeah, if your kid was involved, then you would either grab them and get to safety, or.
I think it has a lot to do with the age of a person too.
No, this is something ingrained into you. You can see it's like I said, this is something hardwired.
Well, when I was a kid, I never run from anything, I'll tell you. If I had to, I mean, somebody threatened me, they're going to get threatened back. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, it's just an instinctive response, and neither is good or bad. It's just, like I said, it's something hardwired.
Now I think I would find me a safe place to go somewhere.
Yeah, like I said, this is not something you even think about. This is something, if I remember one time the lightning struck in the front yard of our house, and I was in the kitchen before I even knew I was. I didn't think run. I didn't think. All I knew was I was standing on the front porch, or standing in the front door looking out across the yard, and the lightning hit the front yard, and next thing I know, I'm standing in the kitchen. My feet had kicked into gear long, fight or flight. We, by nature, we are either fight or flight people. When we're attacked, we either instinctively bow up to fight it out, or we run to safety in order to figure out what we're going to do. And like I said, that's largely hardwired into us. Last week, we studied in James that the section that ended with, blessed are you when you endure trials, when you endure struggles. When trials come from the outside, sometimes, threaten, you think of people threatening you, but sometimes the circumstances threaten you, or life just becomes difficult. You may find yourself bowing up and taking it on, standing strong and enduring. And even if you're a flight person, like I said that I am, you may get to safety and then you bow up and you're ready to take it on. But James says when you do that, you are blessed when you stand trials. When those trials come from outside of you, it's easy to do. But what about when the trials come from the inside of you? Now that becomes a very different matter. Someone attacks you verbally, Somebody gets after you. Maybe on the job you get, you have a supervisor that for some reason, unreasonably or uncalled for, attacks you. And you feel that pride in you starting to bow up a little bit. See, where is that attack really coming from? Well, part of it's coming from the inside, because you're not in danger. You know that. This is not like somebody threatening you with physical violence. This is just somebody attacking your pride, and your pride starts swelling up. The challenge comes from the inside. Or, you got your old beat up ride there and you're getting kind of tired and frustrated with it, and then here comes a friend that comes up to show you his brand new truck. and you start thinking, oh man, I'm so disappointed in my, See, that's a challenge that's coming from the inside of you. Or maybe you're talking with somebody and they're telling stories and you want to tell a story about something you did once sometime, and you're thinking, oh, I'll just embellish it just a little bit, make myself look a little bit better than I really was, No, see, those kind of struggles that come from the inside of us. Or you think of, the teenager that gets caught out and in trouble, and it really looks like if they just tell a good lie, it'll get them right out of it, And so the pressure is there, just to lie, And these struggles that come from inside, so you have this battle going on the inside. Well, we're going to continue in James chapter 1 where we left off last week, but James shifts the focus from the trials that we get on the outside to those that come from within us. James chapter 1 and verse 13.
Yeah.
When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Now, as we're sitting here looking at it, we may not realize the tie between this section, the old, and the section we studied last week. But it helps if you understand that the word trials and in the first section and the word temptation in the second section are the same word. We have two different words, but in the Greek, the Greeks only had one word. They saw the struggles on the inside and the struggles on the outside as being very much the same things, just where they come from. And so he says, when you're tested or when you're tempted, nobody should say that God is tempting me. Have you ever been tested? Have you ever had the challenge that you thought, God is testing me. God is tempting me with it to do something I shouldn't do. In our culture, that's probably one that doesn't come up a lot, at least conspicuously. When we think of God tempting us, we think of, if it's like Jesus in the wilderness, it's God who's saying, turn those breads to stone. Or it's God that's the one that would be telling you to do something you shouldn't do. And we think that's God tempting us. And we say, obviously God is not doing that. So God is not tempting us. So no, our first response is, no, I've never been challenged to think that God was tempting me. And yet, how many people have saw temptation creeping in, and we start to excuse it by the circumstances? I could be a little more honest about this car I'm selling to the guy, but I really need to get rid of this car, and they can handle it, Or I really need to be more honest with my taxes. It's tax season. But, the government, they waste money all the time. And we start excusing sin based upon the circumstances that we're in. I know the Bible says this, but, things are really hard right now. And we start figuring out ways that maybe God is behind this. And we can excuse a lot of dishonesty and unfaithfulness and just being generally sinful just because we say, surely God wouldn't expect me to do this, whatever it is, because that's just too hard. And what we've just done is, through kind of a back door, we've said God must be the one that's behind this temptation to do evil. And so there is a way that it does affect us, and that we do feel some of this. There evidently was some big debate about this amongst Jews in the first century about whether God tempted somebody, whether under circumstances God might test people to see if they would stay faithful. And so James here is confronting a false doctrine of the day. This idea that God would test us to, I also hear it when I hear people say that, why are we on this earth? And well, the only reason we're here is so that God can test us for a little while. And that doesn't fly, because once again, James says, no one should say God is tempting me. No one should say God is testing me. So if our temptations don't come from God, where do they come from? Well, you notice he says every one of us is tempted, which is at least comforting. Each one of us has to go through temptations. We are tempted when it says we are dragged away, literally, tugged, pulled away by our own desires when they are enticed by Satan, or when they're enticed with evil. When we're drawn away by our own desires, some translations say evil desires, but the word evil is not really in there, it's just the term desires. When we are dragged away by our own desires, that's when we are tempted. They start from within us. We all have desires that are within us. We want to be liked. We want to be comfortable. We want to win. We want to be important. We want to be first, We want to have and enjoy good things. See, those are desires. You can probably think of some others that just come into mind. We have things that we want. We want to belong. We want to fit in. We want to be normal. We want to have friends. We want to be safe. Those are all desires. We all have desires. And sometimes what Satan does, what the demons do, is they just say, here's a way you can have what you want, but you have to do that which you're not supposed to do. That's where you get. And some desires are not very strong. Some of them are excruciatingly difficult. And a lot of that has to do with how we were raised and how we've grown up. We all have deficits they talk about in our makeup, in our psyche, things that we really struggle with. There's 1,000 examples. I think of Luke chapter 11 is about temptation and desire. The Romans had a law, that a Roman soldier could make anybody carry his pack for 1 mile. Now, if you're a Roman soldier, why would you come up to somebody and say, carry it for 1 mile? Well, it didn't have to do with the fact that the Roman soldier was tired. That might play into it, but that's not the real reason. It was basically just a way of saying, I'm a Roman and you're not. Or they could strike you one time. A Roman soldier could strike anybody one time. And he was within his legal rights to do that. And why would he do that? Well, kind of the same way, just to say, because look at me, I'm a Roman and you're not. Now, if you're the one that's getting struck, or the one that's saying, carry the pack, how do you respond to that? Yeah, there's that temptation to bow up and say, I'm somebody too. I'm not going to take that. What do we call that? It's pride. That's pride. What does Jesus say to do?
Turn the other cheek. Go 2 miles.
If he slaps you on one cheek, just turn the other cheek. If he carries 1 mile, go 2 miles. You're basically defying the system, but in a different way. Not by asserting your power and prominence, but by asserting your service and your humility. But the point is, the challenge, the temptation, has to do with pride. It has to do with that feeling that I'm somebody. And temptations find their origin there. And there's thousands of examples. Here you're driving down the road, you're in a hurry, and here's a person in obvious need. What do? Man, I've got to get somewhere. You know, we've got 1,000 reasons not to stop. I will tell you a true story. I went back in October. I went off-roading with some of the guys, and it was fun. And we were out in western Arkansas, and we went to eat lunch, and I was riding back from eating lunch with John Brodowski. Now, the rest of the guys that were all in front of us, they'd already got back to the camp site where we were all at, and we were the last ones. And we run across a guy walking out of the woods. And that's not a good sign when you're in an off-roading area. And sure enough, John pulls over and says, "What's happening?" He said, "Man," he said, "I'm stuck back in there on the trail." He had walked about a mile out of the woods, and he said, "I'm stuck back there on the trail. Can you help me?" Long story short, John Brodowski spent the next 3 hours winding his way back around to where the guy was. And by that time, we'd ran across some others, and they were helping too. And they'd got the guy off, he had high-centered on a rock, and got him off the rock so that they could go on. And then we got back, and like I said, 3 to 4 hours. And I'm thinking, you know, John Brodowski never says a disgruntled word. Man, his passenger wasn't doing as well, you know. I was thinking, oh man, we were looking forward to getting back and having dinner with the, you know, the group we were with and all kinds. John just, you know, because he had the same plans I had. But John was good at, he set it all aside. Spend the next few hours getting that guy out of a jam. Now, you know, it's easy to think, well, but I'm in a hurry. I've got this plan, I've got that plan, and all these reasons we can come up with for not doing what we know we ought to do. See, those come from within us. The fear, you know, fear causes us to do a lot of things. Being disrespected, and we want to respond a certain way. That's Satan working at us to tempt us. Now, is the inner compulsion itself a sin? You know, you see the person on the side of the road and say, "Man, I don't want to stop. Have I just sinned?" And the answer is no. No, the temptation is not sin. The temptation to not do what you ought to do is not sin. You're tempted to hedge the truth a little bit. You know, half-truth, which is also a half-lie, but we don't call it that. You know, the temptation to do it is not sin. And the reason why Jesus was tempted. And so the temptation itself is not sin. But it becomes sin when it's acted on. Yeah. When it becomes the motivating force for what you're doing. Sin is when you do that which you should not do. It's not just the compulsion to do it. And that's a big thing, because you see a lot of people that beat themselves up over the fact that they really wanted to do something they knew they shouldn't do. They didn't do it, but they really struggled with it. Temptation is not sin. We all experience temptation. Jesus experienced temptation himself. What makes it sin, James says, is when it's that desire to do something evil has conceived and bears fruit in actions. That's when it becomes sin. Now,